Hi, we're so glad that you found this video on YouTube, and we just wanted to say hi and just welcome you today. We hope that this video is a blessing for you. We're a church in England, in Weymouth, Dorset, and if you'd like any more information about what we're doing, what we're up to, and what's happening, visit our website. It's prayerhouse.uk. That's prayerhouse.uk. And if you'd like some prayer or just get in touch with somebody, you can also email connect@prayerhouse.uk. connect@prayerhouse.uk. And regular updates, pictures, videos, all that sort of thing. Lots of fun happening on social media. So go ahead, find us on Facebook and Instagram, and stay in touch with us there as well.
Thousand stories of what they think you're like, but I know the tender whisper of love in the dead of night. You tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. Come on, your voice is lifted. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. For answers far and wide, but I know we're all searching for answers. Only you provide, 'cause you know just what we need before we say a word. 'Cause you're a good, good Father. It's who you are, it's who you are, it's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am, it's who I am, it's who I am. You're a good, good Father. It's who you are, it's who you are, it's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am, it's who I am, it's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Oh, you are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Oh, you are perfect in all. Oh, you are Jesus to us. Love so undeniable, I can hardly speak, and peace so unexplainable, I can hardly think as you draw deeper still as you call me, deeper still as you call me, deeper still into love. Come on. as you call me deeper, oh, as you call deeper still, as you call deeper still, as you call deeper still into love, love, love. 'Cause you're a good, good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by. That's right. It's who I am. You're a good Father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Oh, it's who you are.
I'd like to just build a little bit on where we were last week. We talked about Gideon last week, didn't we? If you missed it, it's on YouTube, but it's different. It's a version 2 because it didn't record. So we recorded it in an undisclosed location, and it was not without its challenges. So if the sound changes and the camera angle changes, it's because the battery ran out on the camera, and we switched to phone power. So Lydia's hair is a lot thinner now than it was before that. But it really just, we were talking about that sense where we feel like we've been completely overrun and stripped away and stripped down to kind of almost our skeleton. And we're like, God, help us. The enemy is too much for us. It's too big. And how God met with Gideon and how he will meet with us and give us the victory, a resounding victory. And we've got two options, haven't we? Gideon could have gone out there with his kind of nominal army of 30-odd thousand, and they may have fought valiantly, but they would have probably been overcome. But God said, you've got too many. We're going to get this army slimmed down a bit. And he went right down to 300. And it's just an incredible story. It's one of those kind of benchmark stories in the history of the nation of Israel that define them as God's people. And to this day, if you spoke to a Jew about Gideon, I'm sure they would be able to tell you, oh yeah, Gideon. So now we're going to have a little look at another story which is in the New Testament, which every one of us will know, I would imagine, and it's in all of the three, what we call synoptic gospels. That just means they see together, they report the same thing, but they report it from different kind of camera angles, if you like, different perspectives. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Matthew, Mark, and Luke are called the synoptic gospels. It means they see together, they see the same thing. And they report the same thing. And a lot of the stories that are reported in Matthew are reported in Mark and Luke. But this is the time when Jesus is feeding the 5,000. So we all know the story, don't we? But I'd just like to... you can find the story in Matthew 14 and Mark 6, I think it is. No, is it? Hold on. Mark 6 and Luke 9. Is it 9? Cool. And so we get different details and different angles and so on from each of the guys. But I'm going to just kind of set the scene, really. So Jesus had sent out the 12 apostles into the villages and towns to do miracles and to preach the gospel. And they'd been out on a mission, and they'd seen God do amazing things, and then they came back to Jesus, and I guess they were excited and probably tired. So anyone who's ever been out on any kind of mission will know that there are two things happen. One is you get excited when you see God move, and the other is you get kind of tired and a little bit needing some refreshment and so on. And another thing had also happened, and that was that John the Baptist, who was a relative of Jesus, but also a great friend, and he'd been the forerunner who'd said, this guy who's coming after me, I'm not worthy to undo his shoes. He's this incredible guy. He is the Messiah. He's going to baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire. That John the Baptist had his head cut off in a horrible, horrible display of kind of drunken tyranny by King Herod. And so, excuse me, so Jesus heard the news, and Jesus was sad in his own heart. So he was a close friend of John, and although we don't have accounts of them spending a lot of time together, we know that there was a huge level of respect and love between them, and Jesus just wants to go somewhere quiet to reflect on it. So he takes the 12 and he says, let's go to a remote place and let's just hang out a bit. And I would imagine the 12 were thinking, that'll be really nice because I'm tired and I wouldn't mind hanging out with Jesus. And I'm sure Jesus was feeling like, I need to just kind of reflect now on the fact that this incredible man of God has been taken in such a brutal way. I need to grieve. It's appropriate. So they did all this stuff. They cast out the demons, and it was incredible. And then we have this awful story of the dancing girl who asked for John the Baptist's head on a platter. And you can read all of that in the preceding verses. So from about verse 7 of Mark chapter 6. But then it comes back, if we jump in on verse 30, it says, the apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they, thank you, Wendy, and told him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while. So I'm sure they were thinking, that sounds pretty good. For many had been coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. That's pretty hectic. You think you're busy? I know some mums don't get time to eat when the little ones are on the go all the time. But these disciples, they were kind of really tired, and they'd been stretched and hadn't even had time to eat themselves. And they went away in a desolate place by themselves, to a desolate place. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they ran there on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd, and he began to teach them many things. So you can imagine the disciples getting there and seeing this great crowd and thinking, oh, this isn't working out quite how I'd hoped. So their little moment of R&R, rest and, relaxation had evaporated in a moment. There's this huge crowd, and Jesus gets out of the boat and is straight in. He starts to preach and teach this multitude of people. And he teaches them many things. That means it went on for a while, doesn't it, really? And so then he began to, and when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, verse 35, this is a desolate place, and the hour is now late. Send them away to go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. But he answered them, you give them something to eat. And Priscilla Shearer, I was listening to her, she's a great preacher, and she was talking on this chapter, and she was saying that when the multitude comes, very often our solution is to want to send the multitude away. So when we're feeling overwhelmed by a particular situation, our natural tendency is to want to send them away. And actually, this multitude had turned up and were hungrily feeding on Jesus. And Jesus is responding to that. But yet the disciples want to send them away. They're like, we're done now. Surely we're done. We still haven't had tea. I'm starving. Haven't eaten for a few days. And Jesus said we would go somewhere quiet, and it's not working out. It's worse than ever. So he says, send them away. The disciples said to Jesus, send them away to go into the surrounding villages and buy themselves something to eat. Like, let that problem be their problem. Just come on, Jesus, wrap up this meeting now and let's have some real proper downtime. But he answered them, you give them something to eat. So Jesus, bear in mind, Jesus has got these 12 as, what does he call them? What does he call the 12? Disciples. What's a disciple? He's a follower or she's a follower. Someone being taught. Someone learning. And so here's a situation, and Jesus is training disciples, and he says, right, this is a discipleship moment. This is a training opportunity. Rather than let's do the easy thing, send them away. That would be what a normal person would do. A disciple of Jesus, however, is going to have a different approach to this situation. And so Jesus says, no, you give them something to eat. And they said to him, shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat? And I think there's a bit of sarcasm involved. It's like, that's not going to even stretch to, because a day's pay for a laborer was 1 denarii. So 200 denarii wasn't going to really cover 5,000 men, plus their wives, plus their children, and everyone else who was hanging on. It's just like not going to work, is it? And then he said to them, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. It's a bit like when your mum says, go and see, go and look. It's like, we've already looked. We've come to you, mum, and there's nothing. We'll go and look. And so Jesus is saying, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. And this so reminds me of the story we were looking at last week with Gideon. Can you remember what God said to Gideon when he wanted him to go and chop down the pole and bash down the altar? What did he say to Gideon? Go in the strength you have. Just go. I don't care whether you're feeling it, Gideon, whether you got goosebumps or not. Just go. In the strength you have, just be obedient, take a step, and watch what happens next. So Gideon goes out, doesn't he? Smashes down the altar, builds a new altar to God, which had to be built in a particular way, saw down the Asherah pole, this big old fertility symbol in the back garden, and then sacrifice your dad's favorite bull on the altar. So Gideon has to do all of this stuff without any real evidence, if you like, that he wasn't experiencing that infilling of the Holy Spirit at that time. We read that happens just a bit later on in the story. But we get this sense of Gideon going out, and he's scared, so he does it in the dark, because he doesn't want to attract attention. He doesn't want to wake up the villagers and they all come out with their pitchforks to slay him in the night. So this Gideon is just acting like as just a really humble act of obedience. And then Moses, when God is speaking to him through the burning bush, and he's saying, I want to send you, or I am sending you to Egypt to go and confront Pharaoh to let my people go. Moses is like full of excuses. I can't go, oh God, this is not going to work. God's saying, listen, you don't understand. I'm coming with you. That's the difference. And Moses is still full of his kind of, I can't do it speech. God says, what have you got in your hand? Well, it's a stick. It's a walking stick. It's not very impressive. It's dead. It's chopped down from a tree. And God says, throw the stick on the ground. What have you got in your hand? Go in this strength you have. How many loaves do you have? Same scenario, isn't it? Different particulars, but the same kind of thing. Right, naturally speaking, guys, what resources do you have? We don't have anything. Just think about the lady whose husband was a prophet, and he dies, and she's got massive debts to pay off. She can't repay the debts. She's got 2 sons. The landlord has said, pay, or the person she owes the money to has said, pay up, or I'll come and I'll take your sons off you to be my slaves. What does the prophet say to her? What does Elisha say to her? What have you got in your house? What have you got? This is an impossible situation, all right? What have you got? What are you able to bring to the party? And she says, well, I've got a little thing of oil. And he says, great, that'll do. Go and get all these pots and jugs and things like this and get them off of all your neighbors. Don't get a few, get loads. Fill your house up with them. And then she begins this pouring out of the oil, and God touches that moment of obedience. And I would imagine that she starts that whole little thing off with a lot of trepidation. I would think she's probably looking at the bottle as she's pouring it and thinking, well, yeah, this is going to be over quickly because we have only got one tiny bit of oil. And do I just put 1 drop in each one and see what happens and see if it kind of grows? Or do I think as she got going, she was going for it. And I'm sure after she realized what was happening, she just glugged this oil in cheerfully. And I'm sure the atmosphere in the house lifted immensely. And I would imagine it was the same with the disciples, wasn't it? So who's going to be the first one who stands up and breaks the bread and gives it to somebody? And you can imagine they're thinking this is going to be over pretty soon. There's going to be a lot of disgruntled people who didn't get anything. And there's 3 or 4 people who got a small mouthful. And then it happens, doesn't it? So what happens? Let's read it. So he says to them, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. And when they had found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. And he commanded them to sit down in groups on the green grass. And Priscilla Shearer says a brilliant thing about this. She says, when you've had a really, really, really good meal, all you can do is just sit there and kind of bloat. And so Jesus got them all sat down ready because they were going to have a proper good feed up. They weren't just going to have a little mouthful. They were going to properly be filled. And so they sit down in groups by hundreds and by 50s. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up into heaven and said a blessing and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all, and they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish, and those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men. That is an incredible story. They had 12 basketfuls left over at the end of the feed up. So I guess each of the disciples could have taken a basketful home to their family or to their neighborhood, couldn't they? So you're in a situation and it feels like you're overwhelmed. The need is much greater than the resources you have or we have. And then Jesus says, what do you have? What resources do you have? And then the key thing in the whole story is when he says, give them to me. Isn't it? That's the turning point. Give them to me. And Jesus blessed them and broke them. And you and I face ourselves face many situations, but so there are times when really it feels like we're being overrun. And there's an incredible song that says, when it looks like I'm surrounded by you. And we need to have our eyes opened in that moment to see God, to see Jesus standing there, and to bring the resources that we have and present them to him. And last Sunday, I was talking a little bit about how personally challenging it has been to watch certain events unfolding in our own family, but also to see the challenge before us as a church, and to see that some people had decided they wanted to move on to a different church from here. And, those kind of things are kind of difficult, aren't they? And it feels like that we're kind of becoming overwhelmed by a situation that we don't have the resources to meet. And yet God's command to us and call to us is still the same, isn't it? And rather than send the situation away, rather than send the kind of difficulty away, I believe there are times when God wants to actually, for us to become the miracle in that situation and to be the one that makes a difference. And to watch the bread multiply, to watch the oil multiply in our very hands. And Jesus told a story, didn't he, about a little, and it wasn't a story, he was actually observing people when they came to give their offering to the Lord in the synagogue. And he saw these rich guys coming in with a lot of ceremony and kind of opening their rather large wallet and depositing coins in the coffers or whatever. And everyone kind of... And then this humble lady comes in and she kind of rather discreetly puts in one little tiny coin in the offering. And Jesus comments to his disciples and he said, you know what, this lady is the one who's given most. Everyone else has come and they've given out of their great abundance and out of their great wealth, but this lady who's literally got nothing, she's come and she's given everything she had. And we realize that actually God's scheme of things and God's maths are very different to ours. And I don't think it would have mattered if there was one loaf and one fish, do you? I think the point is that it was a miracle of multiplication. And I just want to say two things, really. One is that there's a place where Paul says that the church had given themselves first to the Lord and then to us as the apostles. So he says, you gave yourselves first to the Lord and then also to us. And I think sometimes we look at ourselves and we think, I am not even a loaf and a fish. I don't have anything much to bring to the party. But actually what God is wanting for us to do is to present ourselves to him and say, come on, God, do the miracle through me. Small as, like that Christmas carol, what can I give him? Poor as I am, and so on. And there are other times when he wants us to actually put something down into his hands that represents everything we've got. It may not be that we're literally coming and emptying out our bank account and giving it all to the Lord, but where we place in his hands something that represents a significant sacrifice to us. Where we're saying, God, I'm in this situation. I don't know how to change it. I can't leverage anything I can't bring in a great resource to fix this situation. And God says, what have you got in your hand? And we just put that in his hands as an act of faith. And we say, well, I'm going to give it to you then, God. I'm going to give it to you. And sometimes it will be money. Sometimes it will be something that we treasure, a thing that we kind of hold on to. Or maybe it is just a meal, and we think, God, I would love to be able to be hospitable, but I haven't got enough to be hospitable with. And God says, well, what have you got in your cupboard? And you say, okay, I can make one meal. We'll do that then. Clean out the cupboard, make a decent meal, and invite someone who can't repay you to come and eat the meal with you. And say, God, I want to change the world, but I can't make it happen. The world is too great. I want to win my neighborhood for Jesus, but my neighborhood is too great. I don't know how to make inroads into that. Well, what have you got? Well, I could have some people round for a meal. Do it. Invite some people from your street who you don't know. Say, I don't know you, but I'd love you to come into my house, and I'm going to make a meal. I want to really make you happy with this food. So what do you have in your hand? And are you willing to hand that over to Jesus to prime the pump for a miracle? Are you willing to hand him your packed lunch and say, I wonder if the little boy, where the little guy was in this whole story. It does say, I think he was willing to give it, but you can imagine Andrew seeing the little boy just about to sit down and eat his lunch. Give that to me, son. Where does the miracle happen first? It's got to happen in here, hasn't it? It's got to happen in my heart so that I am not coerced into this, but I hand over this thing willingly to Jesus and say, Lord, I'm giving this to you. Multiply it. Let it become something. The first step of giving ourselves, I would even like to give an opportunity this morning for someone to just step forward and say, God, I'm giving you me. I'm the loaves and fish. I'm giving you me to use to feed the multitude, to reach the need in my community, to reach the need in the world. I'm going to give you myself, and I want you to share me out. Divide, make that, I don't know how to articulate that better, but I want give myself to you, that you will use me as a resource to bring a miracle. So I'm going to ask us to stand. Kathy, I don't know if you could bring the offering basket back out. I'm not asking for your money, although that may be what God is putting his finger on right now. Maybe that you just want to, I don't know how to do this really, but I kind of feel like we need to respond, so just bear with me. Yeah, Jesus. If you want to write something down on a piece of paper and put it in the offering basket, it's like that thing of, God, we sing these songs, don't we? I surrender all. I surrender all. And we're not collecting for the building fund, although that would be a good thing to do sometime, at some point. We're not giving an offering for the church. We're just saying, God, you've called me to be a disciple. I want you to do a miracle of multiplication with my resources to feed this multitude of people who need you all around me. I want to, and it may be that you just want to come and stand here in the presence of God and say, God, I'm giving myself. I'm willing to go. I'm willing to be sent, Lord. And this is not between you and me. This is between you and Jesus. So we're saying, God, I'm putting myself in your hands. But also you may want to come and just write on a piece of paper and just say, God, I give this to you. I'm going to give this to you to multiply. Yeah. Jesus. And there will always be mental objections, and we'll always try and think, well, what if it goes this way or that way or the other way? But the point in this moment is of a decision to surrender to him. Jesus. So rather than send the situation away, God, use me to be a solution to this situation. Use what I present to you. Yeah. So just in this moment, if you want to respond, that would be great. And this is part of our worship, but it's also part of us becoming disciples and learning to entrust what we have into the hands of Jesus. God, we love you. Yeah. If you've never been somebody for public expressions of your devotion, how about just coming out of your seat, standing at the front with your hands in the air and saying, God, I'm going to give you my pride and my self-consciousness. I'm going to get off my worry horse about what I look like and just give you myself. God, come on. So, Lord, in this moment, we ask, Holy Spirit, you come fresh. Fill us, God. Yeah.